In part 1 of the Acoustic Research ETL1 belt drive turntable, we diagnosed a problem with the motor controller board, which was a missing regulator. So I had to figure out that it was a 12-volt regulator that we needed on this. I got the board all wired up, got the board repaired, got the motor working. Now we've gone and got the parts, including a power transformer, so I can complete this job and put everything back together. I'm back on the AR turntable with the bad driver board, and I've got a new 12-volt regulator IC that we're going to put on here and see if that one makes this motor work properly. And then I'll try and mount this back in the cabinet and see whether we can get it working, and then I just need to find a power supply suitable for it, which I'm sure I've probably got some power supplies kicking around here that I can use. So I'm just going to remove the initial 8-volt regulator that I put in for testing, and we'll get the new 12-volt regulator IC. Clean up the board a bit here. Once I verify that this works, then I'll remount the board and try and find a way to mount the motor. I don't have the right screws for it, and the fellow that owns it doesn't seem to know where they are either, so I'll have to come up with a way of mounting this. I'm sure I've probably got some nuts and bolts that can secure this, or I'll have to run up to the store and get a few. Okay, it's ready to test with a single supply. Power supply is set for 27 volts, and as you can see, the motor is turning. That's off. And here's the two speeds. Stop and then start. That should do it. Now I should be able to mount the board back in the chassis and secure the motor. And we'll get a pulley. I've got a pulley for it. I'll have to secure the pulley, and we'll see if the turntable will actually turn at the right speed. I should have everything. I got to find a couple bolts to bolt this in. I'll still run it with an external power supply for now. I've got to come up with a build for one. I'm sure I can probably find a transformer around here that'll put out about 24 volts AC, and then I can rectify that and regulate it. Shouldn't even need to regulate the raw side, right? Because it has a regulator on board for the lower voltage circuits. Anyway, let's get the cabinet base and get this thing mounted in it again. So what I've done to secure the base while I'm working on this is I've taken a cardboard box. I've opened the cardboard box up so that three sides are supported and the other side is open, so that the tone arm is not in any way contacting the like this is the side that's open here of the box. It's taped down so that it doesn't move, and it protects the tone arm from touching anything. And I've got the other side of it propped up with a support underneath the metal chassis, so there's nothing touching against the wood base. I don't want to cause any scratches any more than at least it already has. That way I can mount the motor, and I can mount the the power board and the switch control on the unit back into the unit as it was. Say we'll have to find a place to put the power supply in here. I think the transformer was probably mounted over here before, but we'll find a place to mount something in there. I just want to get the power board in and get the motor mounted so that I can test it. So the button assembly just mounts in here. And the screws come up through these holes. There's a couple washers that go on here and some nuts with lock washers to hold it in place. And the circuit board was held in place with a couple standoffs that went through the board. Looks like there was one here that's missing, but there was a couple standoffs on here. The board was mounted in like this on two standoffs, one over here and one on this side. It's going to get the standoffs and re-secure the board. Okay, I've remounted the board. I just have to find a couple screws so that I can reattach the motor. Motor goes in like this. Looks like there's a couple of other self-threading screws. I just have to find a couple of self-threading screws that will fit into the mechanism. Some short self-tapping screws. But it's okay, I got a whole drawer full of old screws. Anytime I take something apart, I hang on to all the screws because you never know when something's going to walk in the door that you need screws for. There we go, that one will hold that one in. It's going to find another one just like that. I'm sure I've got another one in here. And here it is. Okay, I've reattached the motor. It's in there nice and solid. Board is attached. I've got my power supply wires, positive and negative. Positive being marked with the marker. Just going to turn this thing over, connect it to power. We'll get the pulley back on it, get a belt on it, and see how well this thing turns. And there's what I did to protect the tone arm. I had a block underneath here to hold this part up the same height as this box, so that way the whole table was just resting, or the whole chassis was resting on a box here, and a box that's open that's over top of the tone arm to protect it from any damage. There's this tone arm there, all anchored in place and protected. Next I got to put the actual platter back in. I still got to take the I still got to keep I got the base off it still because I still have to put the bottom on it after I get a power supply for it. I want to test it first, so we'll put the lower portion of the platter back in. Now, of course, to mount the pulley, I'm going to have to cement it in place because the fellow that worked on this before, I guess he took the glue off it and the pulley just will fall down. So obviously I'm going to have to put a bit of glue on here just to hold the pulley in place. Now, in case any of you are going to wonder what type of glue I'm using, I'm just using standard general purpose white water soluble glue, because this is just needing to hold the pulley on here at the right height. I'll let that set up for a bit, then we can test it. So this is just your standard regular ordinary number 2. I think this is number 2. Well, this was sold, it's called number 2 glue from Main Electronics. This is the type of glue you would use for putting your speaker surrounds and stuff on if you're rebuilding speakers. It's just standard general purpose, you know, a horse hoof type glue, for lack of better sense. The non-toxic stuff that you use in elementary school to glue stuff. Just standard water-based glue. all it needs to do is just bond between, because this is a precision fit, so there's not really much in the way of slop between the motor shaft and the actual pulley itself. So we just need to fill the gap there, and then it's easy to remove it. All you have to do is basically heat it up a bit, and it'll pop right off, and then it's easy to clean this up. It's not like putting on crazy glue or something, which is, or worse, epoxy, which will certainly hold it, but it's also a lot more difficult to deal with it after the fact. This should hold this no problem, and it won't cause any long-term problems if it ever has to come off again. Okay, the glue should be dry enough now that I can put a belt on this thing. And we'll connect up power and see what it does. I hear the motor turning, but I don't see the turntable turning. Yeah, I think that motor is shot. Look at the pulley. I think this motor is bad. I guess I may have to actually put that sound of the wood type motor back in. I know it works, so let's put that one in and see whether we get any better results. Although I can't test it because this belt I have is not the right belt. I grabbed it off another AR, but it actually, the center sub table is larger on its different model, so I won't be able to test it with that, but I should be able to get that other motor in here. Now, good thing I didn't use permanent glue, because I should be able to get this off quite easily here. There we go. It's the nice thing about using glue that's not too permanent is that, especially when it's not completely set up, you can easily get the glue off. So I'm going to grab that other motor, and we'll put that other motor into this thing and see whether it performs any better. I just cut the old wires and rewired it to the new motor, and I'm just going to put some heat shrink tubing over the connections here. I know somebody's probably not going to be happy with this, but too bad, so sad. No one's ever going to see it. It's in the base of the unit. I didn't want to have to pull that board out again because this circuit board here is not very good shape. It's got damage to it, so I want to prevent any additional damage. So I don't want to put any more stress on it than I absolutely have to. So that'll prevent any short circuits. Not going to affect any of the operation of it. Now I just need to unscrew the old motor and put the new one in. And this one will fit in exactly the same mounting that the other one did. And then the guy that owns this thing will be happy that the money he spent on this new motor isn't wasted. He'll get his turntable back with the new motor. Okay, the motor's mounted with the pulley on it. I'm just going to allow the glue to set up. As you can see, this one nice and quiet. No noise on this one at all. The other one was making like a thump, 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 so it must have a flat spot on it. This one's nice and quiet. That's what that kind of money gets you in a motor too, right? Because these motors aren't cheap. I think he told me he paid like $300 for this motor. By the time the motor was landed, by the time he paid, because it obviously comes from the States, so I think they're like $180 or so US. So by the time he paid to have the motor shipped up and paid, you know, duties and taxes, and I'm sure he had it shipped up by FedEx or one of those other crooked shipping companies that will, you know, take that $180. Let's do a little math on this. So if it's worth $180 US, at today's exchange rate, would be about $233 Canadian. Okay, so for $233 Canadian times our wonderful taxes, that brings it up to $260. And then FedEx charge another $37.50 to clear it. So, yep, $298.46. He said he paid $300 for it, so now we know what he did. It was $180 US, which is what these motors go for, plus the exchange rate, the PST and GST, and FedEx's unrealistic $37.50 charge that they add on top of that just for doing the paperwork. $300 for a motor. Anyway, we'll get this thing set up, and we'll put the turntable back on it when it's finished and see. Well, obviously that belt that I've got's not going to work, but I'm sure he's got the correct belt for it. As long as it turns and is quiet, he'll be happy. We'll check back on this in a bit once the glue sets up. So I've got a 24 volt DC adapter, 1000 milliamps, overkill. We don't need that kind of power, but this will do it. And the open circuit voltage on this is about 28 volts. So we got more than enough power. I'm going to mount this in the base of the unit, and should be able to get this thing back together and completed, ready for the belt. When the client brings the belt over, I can hook up the belt and balance the tone arm and stuff. But let's connect this power supply now so that I can put this thing back together and get it off my bench. So once again, I've got the unit upside down. I'm going to place the audio cords through the base, because they come out directly through the base of the tone arm on this unit. That way they're not anywhere near where there's going to be power. And I'm going to take the power adapter and I'm going to mount it inside. So I'm going to solder and put some heat shrink tubing over the connection. Once the base is on this thing, it's not going to go anywhere, because it's pretty much the exact size of the cabinet depth here. Once I get the base on and get the screws in, should be able to route the power cable out the back here. I'm just going to drop the base on here and get some screws in it. Now I got all the screws on the base. Let's turn it over and see how it runs. This bearing could use some lubricant on it, so we'll just clean that up and re-lube the main bearing. There. That turns nicely. I'm going to put this incorrect size belt on it. I just want to see how it turns. And then I'll have to wait. The client that owns it's away for a bit, so
he says he's got the right belt for it. Just want to make sure that everything turns as it's supposed to. Looks like it turns. Nice and quiet. See how it looks with the, will it turn with the main turntable? No, that belt is too worn. So we'll have to get the correct belt for it. But the unit itself is complete. I can get it off my bench, and then when the client that owns this returns, he's going to bring the proper belt over and probably bring the top cover so we can remount that, because that's been taken off it too. The plexiglass dust cover's been removed. But I can get this off my bench now. I don't have to look at it anymore. Done. New transformer, new motor, and the motor drive board repaired. Thanks for watching.